The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky hills of eastern Afghanistan as Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun adjusted his scope for the third time in 10 minutes. His spotter, Corpsman Jake Williams, lay beside him on the ridge, scanning the valley below through high-powered binoculars. They had been in position for 6 hours, watching for any sign of Taliban movement in the village of Karga. Still nothing, Williams whispered, his voice barely audible even at close range. Maybe our intel was wrong. Chun didn't respond immediately. Something fell off about this mission from the start. The intelligence report had been too clean, too specific. Taliban fighters were supposedly planning to ambush a convoy on the main road through the valley. The timing, the location, even the number of fighters. Everything was laid out like a textbook operation. But in his 8 years as a Navy SEAL sniper, Chun had learned to trust his instincts more than paperwork. And right now, his instincts were screaming that they were missing something important. The radio crackled softly in his earpiece. Overwatch, this is Thunder 1-6. We're 15 minutes out from your position. Any movement in the kill zone. Chun keyed his mic twice for negative. The convoy would be here soon, and if there really was an ambush waiting, things would get violent fast. He swept his rifle scope across the village again, looking for the subtle signs that separated empty buildings from concealed fighting positions. That's when he saw it. A tiny glint of metal in a window that should have been empty. It lasted only a fraction of a second, but Chun's trained eye caught it immediately. He adjusted his scope and focused on the building, a 2-story mud brick structure on the eastern edge of the village. Got something, he whispered to Williams. Building at 2 o'clock, 2nd floor, 3rd window, from the left. Williams swung his binoculars toward the target. After a moment, he nodded. I see movement. Looks like at least 2 fighters. Chun settled behind his rifle, finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. The shot would be challenging, nearly 800 meters downhill with a crosswind, but well within his capabilities. He began calculating wind speed and bullet drop when something made him pause. The fighters in the building were positioned wrong. If they were planning to ambush the convoy on the main road, they should have been facing south toward the approaching vehicles. Instead, they seemed to be looking northwest, directly toward Chun and Williams' position. Williams, Chun said quietly, I think we've got a problem. Before his spotter could respond, a bullet cracked past Chun's ear, so close he felt the displacement of air against his cheek. Both SEALs immediately rolled away from their position, seeking cover behind a cluster of rocks. Contact! Contact! Chun spoke rapidly into his radio. Overwatch taking effective fire from unknown position. We are compromised. Another shot rang out, this one striking the ground where Chun had been lying moments before. The round punched through the hard-packed earth like it was made of sand, indicating a large-caliber rifle fired by someone who knew exactly where they had been positioned. Williams crawled up beside Chun, his face grim. That wasn't from the village. The angle's all wrong. Chun nodded, his mind racing. Someone else was out here, someone with a clear line of sight to their supposedly concealed position. Someone who had been waiting for them to reveal themselves. Thunder 1-6, this is Overwatch, Chun transmitted. Abort approach to kill zone. We have unknown sniper in Overwatch position. Repeat, abort approach. Overwatch, Thunder 1-6. Cannot abort. We're carrying priority medical supply to forward base. What's your assessment? Chun cursed under his breath. The convoy couldn't turn around, which meant they would have to neutralize the threat. But first, they had to find it. The problem was that their unknown opponent had all the advantages. He knew where they were, had clearly been tracking their movements, and was positioned somewhere with excellent cover and concealment. Meanwhile, Chun and Williams were pinned down behind rocks that wouldn't stop a determined rifle round. We need to move, Williams said, checking his rifle. This position is compromised. Chun agreed, but moving meant exposing themselves to more fire. And somewhere out, there was a shooter skilled enough to nearly take his head off from an unknown distance. He studied the terrain around their position, looking for covered routes of movement. The ridge they were on extended roughly north and south, with steep drops on both sides. Moving along the ridge line would keep them in the rocks, but it would also be predictable. Another shot cracked overhead, followed immediately by the distinctive whistle of a ricochet. This time, Chen was able to get a rough bearing on the muzzle blast, somewhere to the northwest, probably on the opposite ridge. Northwest ridge, he told Williams. Range unknown, but he's got good glass and knows how to use it. Williams studied the distant ridge line through his binoculars. That's got to be 1,500 meters at least. Hell of a shot. It was indeed a hell of a shot, which told Chen several things about their opponent. First, he was using a high-quality rifle with excellent optics. Second, he had extensive training and experience. Third, and most importantly, he had been in position long enough to range the distance and account for environmental factors. This wasn't some Taliban fighter with an old Dragunov. This was a professional. Thunder 1-6, Overwatch, Chen transmitted again. Recommend you take alternate route to forward base. We're dealing with possible foreign fighter with advanced capabilities. Overwatch, negative. No alternate route available through this terrain. We need you to clear the threat. Chen looked at Williams, who shrugged. They both knew what they had to do, even if the odds weren't in their favor. All right, Chen said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to move north along the ridge, try to get a better angle on his position. You stay here and keep him busy. Keep him busy with what? He's not shooting at me. He will be once I start moving. When I do, you put rounds downrange toward that northwest ridge. You won't hit anything at that distance with your carbine, but you might make him keep his head down. Williams nodded reluctantly. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than sitting still and waiting to get picked off. Chen began preparing for his movement, checking his equipment, and studying the route he would take. The ridge offered some concealment, but there would be gaps where he would be visible to anyone watching from the opposite hillside. As he prepared to move, his radio crackled again. But this time it wasn't a convoy. American snipers on Eastern Ridge. The voice was calm, professional, with a slight accent that Chen couldn't immediately place. You have been observed for the past 2 hours. You will withdraw from your position, or you will be eliminated. Chen and Williams looked at each other in shock. Their opponent was monitoring their radio frequency. Williams keyed his mic. Unknown station. This is United States Navy. You are interfering with military operations. Identify yourself. A long pause, then, you may call me Ghost. You have 5 minutes to withdraw. After that, I will consider you hostile combatants. The radio went silent. Chun felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Ghost wasn't just monitoring their frequency. He was confident enough to announce himself. That level of confidence usually came from one of two sources: overwhelming superiority or complete desperation. Given the quality of shooting they had already experienced, Chin suspected it wasn't desperation. Overwatch, Thunder 1-6. Did you copy that transmission? Affirmative, Thunder 1-6. Unknown callsign Ghost has issued ultimatum for withdrawal. Assessing options. But even as Chun spoke into the radio, he was already moving. 5 minutes wasn't enough time to withdraw, and leaving would mean abandoning the convoy to whatever fate awaited them in the valley below. He low-crawled along the ridge, using every scrap of cover available. Behind him, Williams began firing controlled bursts toward the northwest ridge, the crack of his rifle echoing across the valley. Almost immediately, return fire began impacting around Williams' position. But instead of the careful, aimed shots they had experienced earlier, this was rapid fire, at least 3 rounds in quick succession. Chin stopped moving. 3 quick shots meant either multiple shooters or someone with a semi-automatic rifle. Either possibility changed the tactical situation significantly. He found a position behind a large boulder and set up his rifle, scanning the northwest ridge through his scope. The distance was extreme, pushing the limits of his equipment and training, but if he could spot muzzle flashes, he might be able to return effective fire. Williams continued his covering fire, but Chun could hear the difference in the incoming rounds now. Some were impacting high, others low. Different ballistic signatures meant different rifles, which confirmed his worst fear. They weren't facing one sniper. They were facing a team. Williams break contact and "Move to my position," Chun transmitted on their short-range radio. "We've got multiple shooters." "Moving," Williams replied, but before he could begin his movement, a new voice came over their main frequency. "Thunder 1-6, this is Reaper 2-7. We are 30 seconds out from your position with close air support." Chun felt a surge of relief. Reaper 2-7 was an Apache helicopter gunship, capable of engaging targets at ranges far beyond what ground forces could manage. But their relief was short-lived. "Reaper 2-7 Ghost, you will not interfere. Withdraw immediately or face consequences." Chun watched in horror as a streak of light rose from the northwest ridge toward the approaching helicopter. The missile, he could see it was some kind of surface-to-air weapon, tracked perfectly toward the Apache. At the last second, the helicopter's defensive systems engaged, releasing flares and chaff while the pilot threw the aircraft into violent evasive maneuvers. The missile detonated harmlessly several hundred meters away, but the message was clear. Ghost and his team had come prepared for air support. Reaper 2-7 taking evasive action. The pilot transmitted, his voice tight with controlled fear. "Be advised, hostiles are equipped with man-portable air defense systems. Recommend immediate withdrawal of all ground forces." Chun watched the helicopter disappear behind the southern ridge, leaving him and Williams alone again. But now they knew what they were facing. This wasn't a random encounter with Taliban fighters. This was a carefully planned ambush designed to eliminate American forces in this specific location. The question was why. Williams reached Chen's position, breathing hard from his sprint across the rocky ground. "This is getting way too complicated," he said. "We need extraction." Chen nodded but kept scanning the opposite ridge through his scope. Something was bothering him about the whole situation, beyond the obvious fact that they were outnumbered and outgunned. Why had Ghost announced himself? Professional snipers didn't normally give away their positions with radio calls. And why the ultimatum? If the goal was to eliminate American forces, why give them a chance to withdraw? Unless elimination wasn't the primary objective. "Williams," Chun said slowly, "I think we're being herded." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. They knew we were here, had us ranged and ready, but the first shots were near misses. Good enough to pin us down, not good enough to kill us. Then Ghost gets on the radio and gives us an ultimatum. Now they chase off our air support." Williams considered this. "So what's the real target?" Before Chin could answer, his radio crackled again. "Thunder 1-6, Overwatch. We're taking a more direct route to avoid your area of operations. ETA to forward base now 20 minutes. Chin's blood ran cold. "Thunder 1-6, negative. Do not alter course. Repeat, do not alter course." But he was too late. The convoy was already moving, and Ghost had achieved exactly what he wanted. Chun and Williams had been positioned to provide overwatch for the main route through the valley. By forcing them away from that position, Ghost had created a gap in the convoy's protection. And the direct route the convoy was now taking would lead them through terrain perfect for a close-range ambush. "We've been played," Chin said grimly. "This whole thing was designed to get us out of position." The radio crackled with Ghost's voice again, but this time he wasn't talking to them. "All units, Thunder 1-6 is entering Kill Zone 2. Execute Phase 2. Chun grabbed his radio. "Thunder 1-6, you are moving into ambush. Break contact and return to main route immediately." No response. Chun tried again. "Thunder 1-6, Overwatch. Respond." Still nothing. Williams was studying the valley through his binoculars. "I can see dust clouds from the convoy. They're about 2 clicks north of the village, moving through that narrow pass." Chin knew the area. The pass was a natural choke point, with steep sides that would prevent the convoy from maneuvering if attacked. It was also just far enough from their original position to be outside effective rifle range. But not outside the range of the weapons Ghost and his team were carrying. As if to confirm his fears, Chun heard the distinctive crack of high-velocity rifle fire echoing across the valley. Not the scattered shooting of an uncoordinated attack, but the methodical, aimed fire of professional marksmen. Thunder 1-6 is in contact, Williams said, watching the distant engagement through his binoculars. I can see muzzle flashes from multiple positions. Chin was already moving, abandoning his concealed position and running along the ridge toward the sound of gunfire. The tactical situation had collapsed completely, but he couldn't abandon the convoy to face a professional ambush without support. Williams followed, both SEALs moving as fast as the rocky terrain would allow. Behind them, the northwest ridge remained ominously quiet. Ghost and his team were no longer concerned with the two American snipers. They had achieved their objective, and now they were focused on destroying the convoy. As Chun ran, he could hear the engagement intensifying. The sharp crack of rifle fire was joined by the heavier thump of machine guns and the occasional boom of explosives. The convoy was fighting back, but they were caught in terrain that favored the attackers. Overwatch, any station, a desperate voice called over the radio. We are taking effective fire from multiple positions. Request immediate support. We have wounded and limited ammunition. Chun keyed his mic while still running. Thunder 1-6. Overwatch is en route to your position. Hold on. But even as he spoke, Chun knew they were too far away to make a difference. By the time they reached a position where they could provide effective support, the engagement would likely be over. Ghost had planned this perfectly, using Chun and Williams' own professionalism against them. They had been so focused on the threat to themselves that they had failed to see the larger tactical picture. And now good men were dying because of it. The sound of gunfire reached a crescendo, then gradually tapered off. By the time Chun and Williams reached a position where they could see the pass, the shooting had stopped entirely. Black smoke rose from the narrow valley where the convoy had been ambushed. Through his scope, Chun could see the burned hulks of military vehicles scattered across the road like broken toys. Thunder 1-6, Overwatch. What is your status? Silence. Williams lowered his binoculars, his face pale. I don't see any movement down there. Chun continued scanning the ambush site through his rifle scope, looking for any sign of survivors. The vehicles were clearly destroyed, but in situations like this, some personnel might have escaped on foot or found cover. Then he saw something that made his blood boil. Figures were moving among the wreckage. Not American soldiers, but Ghost's team systematically searching the destroyed vehicles. They moved with professional efficiency, checking for intelligence materials and valuable equipment. Those bastards are looting the convoy, Chun said through gritted teeth. Williams raised his binoculars again. I count at least 6 of them, all carrying high-end equipment. Chun studied the figures through his scope. Even at this distance, he could see that these weren't typical insurgent fighters. Their movements were coordinated, their equipment was uniform and modern, and they operated with the kind of tactical discipline that came from extensive training. Foreign fighters, Chun concluded. Probably mercenaries. But that raised even more questions. What were professional mercenaries doing in this remote part of Afghanistan? And what had been in that convoy that was valuable enough to justify this kind of operation? Chen's radio crackled with an unfamiliar voice. Overwatch, this is Falcon 3-1. We are en route to your position with recovery team. ETA, 15 minutes. Falcon 3-1, Overwatch. Be advised, hostile force of at least 6 professional fighters with advanced equipment still in area of operations. Recommend you approach with extreme caution. Roger, Overwatch. We are prepared for contact. Chun hoped they were, because something told him this mission was far from over. Ghost and his team had achieved their primary objective with the convoy, but Chun doubted they would simply disappear into the mountains. Professional mercenaries didn't usually work for free, and someone had paid them well enough to risk engaging American forces in a coordinated operation. That kind of employer would expect them to complete the mission thoroughly, which meant eliminating any witnesses. Chun and Williams were the only American forces left alive in the area, and they had seen enough to compromise Ghost's operation. From a tactical standpoint, the next logical step would be to hunt down and eliminate the 2 SEAL snipers. Williams, Chun said, we need to get out of here. This position is going to become very unhealthy very soon. But as they prepared to move, Chen's radio came alive with Ghost's voice one more time. "Overwatch, Ghost. You've seen too much. We will find you." The transmission ended, leaving Chun and Williams alone on the mountainside with the knowledge that they were now being hunted by a team of professional killers who knew these mountains better than they did. The mission had just become personal. Chun and Williams moved through the rocky terrain like shadows, every sense heightened by the knowledge that they were being hunted. 3 hours had passed since Ghost's final transmission, and the mountain had fallen into an unnatural silence that made Chen's skin crawl. "This doesn't feel right," Williams whispered as they paused behind a cluster of boulders. "If they're tracking us, they're being too quiet about it." Chen nodded, scanning the ridgelines around them through his scope. Professional hunters would be patient, methodical. They wouldn't rush into a pursuit that might cost them the advantage of surprise. But that patience worked both ways. Chen and Williams were SEAL snipers, trained in some of the most demanding survival and evasion courses the military had to offer. They knew how to disappear in hostile territory, how to move without leaving tracks, how to use terrain to their advantage. The question was whether their skills would be enough against opponents who seemed to know these mountains intimately. Chen's earpiece crackled softly. "Overwatch, Falcon 3-1. We are 10 minutes from last known position of Thunder 1-6. What is your current location?" Chen hesitated before responding. Radio communications could be intercepted, and Ghost had already demonstrated his ability to monitor their frequencies. But the recovery team needed guidance to find the ambush site. "Falcon 3-1. Overwatch is 2 kilometers northeast of target location. Be advised, recommend radio silence from this point forward." "Roger, Overwatch." Switching to alternate frequency. The radio went silent, leaving Chun and Williams alone with the sound of wind across stone and the distant cry of a mountain hawk. Williams checked his watch. 4 hours until nightfall. We could try to evade until then. Use darkness to reach the recovery team. It was a solid plan, but Chen had the nagging feeling that Ghost wouldn't let them survive that long. The mercenary team had gone to considerable effort to eliminate the convoy, which suggested their employer had significant resources and motivation. People with that kind of investment didn't usually leave loose ends. "Movement," Williams hissed, pointing toward a ridge approximately 1 kilometer to the south. Chun swung his rifle toward the indicated position and adjusted his scope. At first, he saw nothing but rocks and scrub brush. Then a shadow shifted slightly, not the natural movement of vegetation in the wind, but the deliberate motion of someone trying to remain concealed. "One individual," Chun whispered, "moving parallel to our position, maintaining distance. Keeping us under observation while the rest of the team flanks around," Williams concluded. "Classic hunter-killer pattern." Chun studied the terrain around their position with new urgency. If Ghost was running a standard pursuit pattern, the observer to the south was just one part of a larger trap. There would be other team members positioned to cut off their escape routes, gradually tightening the noose until the SEALs had nowhere to run. "We need to break the pattern," Chin said. "Do something they won't expect." "Like what?" Chin was quiet for a moment, studying the valley floor far below their position. The destroyed convoy was still visible as black smudges against the brown earth, but he noticed something he had missed before. "Williams, look at the convoy site through your scope. Tell me what you see." Williams adjusted his binoculars and studied the ambush location. Destroyed vehicles, scattered equipment, wait. "I see fresh tire tracks leading away from the site, heading northeast toward that secondary road. Ghost's exfiltration route," Chen realized. "They're not planning to disappear into the mountains on foot. They have vehicles waiting." This changed the tactical situation significantly. If Ghost's team was planning to leave the area by vehicle, they would need to eliminate Chun and Williams quickly. They couldn't afford a prolonged pursuit that might allow American reinforcements to arrive and block the escape routes, which meant they would take risks to end this fast. Chun began moving again, but this time he headed downhill toward the valley floor instead of along the ridge. Williams followed, understanding the plan without needing explanation. If Ghost expected them to continue evading through the high ground, moving into the valley might give them a temporary advantage. It was counterintuitive. The valley offered less cover and made them more vulnerable to observation from above, but it also shortened the distance to potential rescue. They had covered perhaps 500 meters when Sean heard the distinctive crack of a suppressed rifle somewhere behind them. Williams dropped immediately, blood spreading from his left shoulder. "I'm hit," he said through gritted teeth, "but I can still move." Chin spun toward the sound of the shot, but saw nothing. The sniper was well concealed and had fired from a position Chin couldn't immediately identify. "Can you make it to that rock formation?" Chin asked, indicating a cluster of large boulders about 50 meters ahead. Williams nodded, clutching his wounded shoulder. They began moving in short rushes, using whatever cover the terrain provided. Each time they moved, Chin expected another shot, but their opponents seemed content to track them for now. That patience worried him. Professional snipers didn't usually wound when they could kill unless they had a specific reason for keeping their targets alive. They reached the rocks, and Williams immediately began applying pressure to his wound. The bullet had passed through the fleshy part of his shoulder without hitting bone or major blood vessels. Painful and debilitating, but not immediately life-threatening. "Flesh wound," Williams confirmed. "I'll live, but my shooting arm is compromised." Chin nodded grimly. They were now down to one effective shooter against at least 6 opponents who knew the terrain and had them under observation. His radio crackled softly. "Overwatch, Falcon 3-1. We have reached the convoy site. No survivors located. What is your current status?" Chin keyed his mic twice to indicate they were alive, but unable to talk. The recovery team would understand that they were in immediate danger. But before Falcon 3-1 could respond, Ghost's voice came over the frequency again. "Falcon 3-1, this is Ghost. Your Overwatch team is under my guns at grid reference." He rattled off coordinates that Sean realized were exactly accurate for their current position. "You will withdraw immediately or they will be eliminated." Chin felt ice in his veins. Ghost wasn't just tracking them. He had them ranged and ready for precise fire. The only reason Chun and Williams were still alive was because Ghost wanted to use them as leverage against the recovery team. "Falcon 3-1, Overwatch," Chin transmitted quickly. "Do not comply with hostile demands. Continue mission." But even as he spoke, Chun knew the recovery team was in an impossible position. They couldn't abandon American personnel, but approaching would likely result in the deaths of everyone involved. "Ghost, Falcon 3-1. What are your terms?" Chun cursed under his breath. The recovery team commander was negotiating, which meant Ghost had achieved tactical control of the situation. "Your Overwatch team will remain in position while you withdraw to minimum safe distance. When I have confirmed your departure, I will consider releasing them." "Consider releasing them?" Williams muttered. "That doesn't sound promising." Chin was studying their position, looking for options. The rock formation provided good cover from above, but it was also a natural containment area. If Ghost's team surrounded them, the rocks that offered protection would become a prison. He needed to change the dynamic of the engagement before that happened. "Falcon 3-1, Overwatch," Chin transmitted. "Break off and establish Overwatch position at grid reference." He provided coordinates for a ridgeline that would give the recovery team clear lines of sight to the valley floor. "Hostile team is using vehicles for exfiltration. Recommend you focus on blocking escape routes." It was a desperate gambit. If Chun was right about Ghost's escape plan, the recovery team might be able to cut them off. If he was wrong, he had just sent potential rescuers away from the immediate area. Ghost's response confirmed that Chun had guessed correctly. "Clever American sniper. But you have made a mistake. My team is not limited to the escape route you have identified." The transmission ended, but Chun could hear the implication clearly. Ghost had multiple exfiltration options, and the recovery team couldn't cover them all. "We're on our own," Chin told Williams. "Are you up for some aggressive maneuvering?" Williams tested his wounded arm and winced. Define aggressive. We're going to hunt the hunters. Williams stared at him. You want to go after a team of 6 professional killers? With 1.5 functional shooters? I want to disrupt their plan before they can execute it. Right now, they have all the advantages because they're controlling the engagement. We need to force them to react instead of act. Chun was already planning the approach. Ghost's team was spread out to maintain surveillance and cut off escape routes, which meant they were vulnerable to a concentrated attack on a single position. The key was identifying which position to target. Chun studied the terrain around their location, trying to think like Ghost. Where would he position his men to maintain control while preparing for exfiltration? The observer we spotted earlier, Chun said suddenly. He's not just watching us. He's in position to provide overwatch for the team's withdrawal route. Williams followed his reasoning. So if we take him out, we disrupt their coordination and potentially block their primary escape route. It was still a long shot, but it was better than waiting for Ghost to tighten the noose. Chun checked his ammunition and equipment, then began plotting a route that would take them toward the observer's last known position. Stay here and maintain radio watch, he told Williams. If I don't report in within 30 minutes, contact Falcon 3-1 and guide them to this position. Chun, wait. Williams grabbed his arm with his good hand. This is a suicide mission. 1 sniper against professional killers on their own ground. Chun nodded. Probably. But if I can take out their overwatch, you might have a chance to evade until the cavalry arrives. Williams was quiet for a moment. There's another option. I am listening. What if we're thinking about this wrong? Ghost wants us alive for leverage, right? So what if we give him what he wants? Chun frowned. Surrender? Not surrender. Negotiation. Ghost is a professional. He's working for money, not ideology. Maybe we can make him a better offer. It was an interesting thought, but Chun shook his head. We don't know who's paying him or why they wanted that convoy destroyed. Whatever we could offer probably doesn't match their motivation. Unless their motivation isn't money. Chun paused. Williams was right to question assumptions. They had been operating under the theory that Ghost was a mercenary team hired to eliminate the convoy. But what if there was more to it? What if the convoy attack was just part of a larger operation? Chun's radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Ghost. It was a new voice, speaking with a crisp British accent. Overwatch, this is Colonel Morrison, Special Air Service. I understand you gentlemen are having some difficulty with a mutual acquaintance. Chun looked at Williams, who shrugged. Neither of them had called for British support. Colonel Morrison, Overwatch. How do you know about our situation? Because Ghost and his team have been operating in this region for the past 6 months, eliminating coalition forces and stealing sensitive equipment. You're not his first target, just his latest. This information changed everything. If Ghost was conducting an extended campaign against coalition forces, it meant he had significant backing and local support. It also meant he was a much bigger threat than Chun had realized. Colonel Morrison, what can you tell us about Ghost's capabilities and objectives? Ghost is former Russian Spetsnaz, recruited by private interests to destabilize coalition operations in this sector. His team consists of 6 operators, all with special forces backgrounds. They've been responsible for at least 12 successful attacks on coalition forces over the past 6 months. Chun felt his stomach drop. 12 attacks meant dozens of dead coalition soldiers, and Ghost was still operating freely. What was his interest in our convoy? Chun asked. Your convoy was carrying prototype communications equipment that would give coalition forces a significant advantage in this region. Ghost's employers couldn't allow that technology to reach the forward base. Now it all made sense. Ghost hadn't been hired just to eliminate a convoy. He had been hired to steal technology that could change the balance of power in the region. And Chun and Williams were the only witnesses who could identify him. Colonel Morrison, what support can you provide? I'm afraid that's complicated. My team is currently 40 minutes from your position, and Ghost will likely complete his mission and exfiltrate before we can arrive. 40 minutes might as well have been 40 hours. Ghost would finish what he started long before British reinforcements could intervene. However, Morrison continued, I can provide you with intelligence about Ghost's likely escape routes and positioning. Chen keyed his mic. Anything you can tell us would be helpful. Ghost typically positions his team in a diamond formation during pursuit operations. One operator maintains long-range overwatch. Two flank positions cut off lateral movement. One rear guard prevents retreat, and two advance elements drive the target toward a predetermined kill zone. Williams counted on his fingers. That's 6 operators, all accounted for. Which means we know where they are, Chun realized. Morrison, can you provide specific positioning based on our current location? Based on terrain analysis and Ghost's previous operations, your long-range overwatch is likely positioned on the ridge 1 kilometer south of your position. Flank positions will be east and west at 800 meters. Rear guard is probably on the ridge you originally occupied. Advance elements will be moving to establish the kill zone somewhere downhill from your current position. Chun studied the terrain with this new information. If Morrison was right, Go's team was spread out over nearly 4 square kilometers, maintaining observation and control but also creating potential vulnerabilities. Morrison, what's Ghost's typical timeline for this type of operation? He prefers to complete elimination within 2 hours of initial contact. After that, the risk of coalition reinforcement becomes too great. Chen checked his watch. It had been nearly 90 minutes since Ghost's first transmission. If Morrison was right, they had perhaps 30 minutes before Ghost would be forced to conclude the operation one way or another. Williams, Chun said, new plan. We're going to use Ghost's own system against him. How? By collapsing his formation. If we can eliminate the overwatch position, the flank positions lose coordination. If we can disrupt the advance elements, the rear guard becomes isolated. Williams nodded slowly. It's still a long shot, but better odds than what we had before. Chin was already moving, heading not toward the suspected overwatch position, but toward the valley floor where Ghost's advance elements would be establishing their kill zone. Morrison, can you maintain communications and provide tactical updates? Affirmative, Overwatch. I'll coordinate with your recovery team to ensure you have support options as they become available. Chun felt slightly better about their chances. They still faced overwhelming odds, but at least now they had intelligence and distant support. The question was whether it would be enough to survive the next 30 minutes. As he moved down the rocky slope toward the valley floor, Chun could almost feel the invisible lines of sight from Ghost position team members. Somewhere above them, professional killers were tracking their movement through rifle scopes, waiting for the right moment to end the engagement permanently. But Chun had spent years learning to operate in exactly these conditions. He knew how to move through hostile observation, how to mask his intentions, how to strike at the moment when his enemies least expected it. Ghost might be a professional, but so was Chun, and this was far from over. Chun moved through the shadows like a predator closing on prey, every step calculated to avoid the killing fields Ghost's team had established. 20 minutes remained before Ghost's operational timeline expired, and Chun could feel the weight of that countdown in every heartbeat. Williams had stayed with the radio, maintaining communication with Colonel Morrison while monitoring Ghost team frequencies. His wounded shoulder prevented him from participating in the assault, but his intelligence updates would be crucial to Chen's survival. Overwatch, Morrison, the British colonel's voice whispered through Chen's earpiece. Thermal imaging from high-altitude drone shows Ghost's advance elements have established position approximately 400 meters downhill from your last known location. 2 operators positioned to create crossfire zones across the valley floor. Chun acknowledged with 2 clicks of his mic, then continued his careful descent toward the valley. The advance elements were the key to Ghost's entire operation. Eliminate them, and the formation would collapse into individual operators trying to coordinate without proper overwatch. But getting close enough to engage them meant crossing open ground under the observation of Ghost's long-range sniper. Chen reached a position behind a fallen tree and studied the terrain ahead through his rifle scope. The valley floor stretched before him, offering minimal cover but multiple routes of approach. In the distance, he could see the burned remains of the convoy, still smoking in the afternoon heat. His earpiece crackled softly. "Chun, this is Williams. I have movement on the east flank position. Single operator, advancing toward your general area." That complicated things. Chun had expected Go's team to maintain their positions until the end of their operational window. If they were moving early, it meant Ghost had decided to accelerate the timeline. "Morrison, Overwatch," Chun transmitted. "Hostile movement on east flank. What's your assessment?" Ghost is probably concerned about coalition reinforcements. He's compressing his operation to ensure completion before external support arrives, which meant Chun had even less time than he thought. He studied the advancing flank position through his scope, tried to identify the operator's route and timing. The terrain would force the hostile to cross several open areas before reaching an effective engagement position. If Chun could time his own movement correctly, he might be able to use the flank position's advance to mask his approach to the advance elements. "Williams, give me continuous updates on flank movement. I'm moving in 60 seconds. "Roger. Flank position is moving along the ridgeline, using rocks for concealment. Current rate of advance will put him in Overwatch position in approximately 8 minutes. 8 minutes to cross 400 meters of open ground, locate 2 concealed operators, and eliminate them before the flank position could provide supporting fire." Chun had attempted similar missions during training, but never with live ammunition and professional killers. He began his approach, moving in short rushes between whatever cover the valley floor provided. A cluster of rocks here, a dry stream bed there, the burned hull of a military vehicle from some previous engagement. Each movement brought him closer to the advance element's position, but also deeper into the kill zone Ghost had established. "Chun, flank position has stopped advancing," Williams reported. "He's setting up what looks like a long-range shooting position." That was bad news. If the flank position had line of sight to the valley floor, Chun would be exposed to fire from multiple directions once he engaged the advance elements. But stopping now meant abandoning the mission and accepting whatever fate Ghost had planned for them. Chun continued forward, using the burned convoy vehicles as waypoints. The destroyed trucks and armored cars offered substantial cover, but they also marked the center of Ghost's original kill zone. Moving through them felt like walking through a graveyard. His earpiece came alive with Morrison's voice. "Overwatch, we have new intelligence from Signal's intercept. Ghost has been ordered to complete his mission and exfiltrate within the next 15 minutes. His employer is concerned about coalition response." 15 minutes. Chun was still 200 meters from the advance element's suspected position. "Morrison, can you provide precise location data for the advance elements?" "Negative. Our drone lost thermal contact when they moved into position among the rocks. You'll have to locate them visually." Chun reached the edge of the convoy site and paused behind an overturned supply truck. The advance elements were somewhere in the rock formations ahead, but identifying their exact positions would require careful observation. He extended his rifle scope and began a systematic scan of the terrain. Professional operators would choose positions that offered both concealment and clear fields of fire, which limited the possible locations significantly. There, a shadow that didn't match the surrounding rocks. Chun studied it through his scope, waiting for movement that would confirm human presence. After 30 seconds, he saw it. The subtle shift of fabric against stone as someone adjusted position behind a cluster of boulders, approximately 150 meters ahead. One operator located. But where was the second? Chun continued scanning, looking for the matching position that would complete the crossfire zone. Ghost team would establish interlocking fields of fire, ensuring that any target caught between them would have no escape route. "Chun, you need to move," Williams transmitted urgently. "Flank position is ranging targets in your area." I can see him adjusting his scope. Time was up. Chun would have to move against the first advance element without locating the second, hoping to identify the remaining operator during the engagement. He began his final approach, moving from cover to cover in a zigzag pattern that would make accurate long-range shooting difficult. The flank position would have to lead his movement, giving Chun brief windows where he would be hidden behind intervening terrain. 50 meters from the first advance element's position, Chun heard the distinctive crack of a rifle somewhere to his right. The bullet struck the ground inches from his feet, throwing dirt and rock fragments into his face. The second advance element had revealed himself by shooting. Chun rolled behind a large boulder and immediately returned fire toward the muzzle flash. He didn't expect to hit anything at this range with a hasty shot, but accurate fire would force the hostile to take cover and disrupt his aim. Almost immediately, the first advance element opened fire from Chen's front, the bullets striking the boulder he was hiding behind with sharp cracks that sent stone chips flying. Chen was caught in exactly the crossfire Ghost had planned, with hostile operators to his front and right flank and a long-range sniper somewhere on the ridgelines above. But being in the trap also meant he knew where his enemies were. Chen waited for a brief pause in the firing, then sprinted toward the right flank position where the second advance element had revealed himself. It was a desperate gambit, running toward the guns instead of away from them, but it would close the distance faster than the hostiles expected. Bullets cracked past his ears as both advance elements tried to track his movement, but Chen's unpredictable route made accurate fire nearly impossible. He reached the rocks where the second advance element was positioned and immediately heard movement on the other side of the boulder cluster. The hostile was repositioning, trying to maintain distance from Chen's assault. Chun circled the rocks clockwise, rifle ready, breathing controlled despite the sprint across open ground. Professional training took over years of close-quarters combat experience guiding his movements. He came around the final boulder and found himself facing a bearded man in civilian clothing carrying a high-end sniper rifle. The hostile was turning toward Chen's position, but Chen's rifle was already aligned. Chun fired twice center mass and watched the hostile fall backward against the rocks. One down, but before Chun could savor the small victory, bullets began impacting around his position from the remaining advance element. The first hostile had repositioned and now had clear shots at Chen's location. Chen used the dead operator's position as cover and began returning fire, trying to suppress the remaining advance element long enough to plan his next move. His earpiece crackled. "Chun, flank position is moving toward your location," Williams reported. ETA approximately 3 minutes. 3 minutes to eliminate the remaining advance element and extract from the area before the flank position could establish overlapping fields of fire. Chin studied the terrain between his position and where the first advance element was firing from. Approximately 75 meters of broken ground with minimal cover, but the hostile would have to expose himself to maintain effective fire. Chin waited for the next muzzle flash, then immediately began moving toward it. The hostile would expect him to stay in cover and trade long-range shots, not charge across open ground. The gambit worked. Chun covered 30 meters before the hostile realized what was happening and adjusted his fire. But 30 meters closer meant Chin's return fire was much more accurate. Chun found cover behind a fallen tree and began placing precise shots at the hostile's position. Each shot forced the advance element to duck behind cover, disrupting his ability to return effective fire. "Williams, where's the flank position now?" 2 minutes out and closing fast. "You need to finish this and move." Chun made his decision. He left his covered position and sprinted directly toward the first advance element's location, firing controlled pairs as he moved. It was the most dangerous approach possible, but it was also the fastest way to end the engagement. The hostile rose from behind his boulder to engage Chin's charge, and that moment of exposure was all Chin needed. 2 shots, perfectly placed, and the second advance element dropped out of sight. Chun reached the position and confirmed the kill, then immediately began moving toward his extraction route. The advance elements were eliminated, but Ghost still had 4 operators positioned around the valley, and they would be coming for him now. "Morrison, overwatch," Chin transmitted while running. "Advance elements neutralized. What's the status on my backup?" "Falcon 3-1 is 15 minutes from your position. British support is 25 minutes out. You need to evade until reinforcements arrive. 15 minutes felt like an eternity when being hunted by professional killers. Chen's earpiece suddenly filled with Ghost's voice, speaking with cold fury. Impressive work, American. You have eliminated 2 of my best operators. But now the hunt becomes personal. Ghost, Overwatch, Chen replied. Your mission is compromised. Withdraw your team while you still can. Ghost's laugh was like ice. My mission was to eliminate coalition forces and recover sensitive technology. Half of that objective is complete. You represent the remaining half. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with the knowledge that Ghost would not be satisfied with simply escaping. The mercenary leader wanted blood for the operators Chen had killed. Chen, this is Williams. I'm seeing movement from multiple positions. They're converging on your location. Chen reached a depression in the valley floor and took shelter, studying the ridgelines around him through his rifle scope. Williams was right. He could see movement from at least 3 different directions as Ghost's remaining operators closed the net. But Chen had disrupted their formation, and now they were operating more aggressively than professionally. Anger could make even experienced fighters careless. Morrison, I need options for breaking contact and reaching Falcon 3-1. There's a secondary valley approximately 1 kilometer northeast of your position. If you can reach it, you'll have better cover and concealment for evasion. 1 kilometer across open ground while being pursued by 4 professional killers. The odds were not encouraging, but Chen had come this far, and Williams was depending on him to reach the rescue team. Williams, I'm moving toward extraction point. Maintain radio watch and guide Falcon 3-1 to your position if I don't make it. Chen, wait. I'm picking up radio traffic on Ghost frequency. Sounds like he's calling for immediate extraction. Chen paused. If Ghost was calling for extraction, it meant the mercenary leader had decided the mission was no longer viable. Or it meant he was setting a trap. Morrison, what's your assessment of Ghost calling for extraction? Could be legitimate concern about coalition reinforcements, or could be deception to make you lower your guard. Ghost is known for psychological operations. Chen had to make a choice. Assume Ghost was really extracting and risk walking into an ambush, or continue evading and risk being caught in the open when fresh hostile reinforcements arrived. He chose a third option. Morrison, can you patch me through to Ghost frequency? That's highly irregular, but yes. You're connected. Chen keyed his radio. Ghost, Overwatch. I have a proposition. A long pause, then Ghost's voice came back. I'm listening. Your mission is compromised. Coalition reinforcements are en route with air support. But you still have 4 operators in good position. I propose a mutual withdrawal. You extract your team, and I won't interfere. Another pause. And in return, you leave my partner alone, and you provide safe passage for our rescue team. Everyone goes home alive. Chen waited, knowing he was gambling everything on Ghost professionalism. Mercenaries were usually practical about cost-benefit analysis. Interesting proposal, Ghost finally replied. But you've killed 2 of my men. Honor demands satisfaction. Honor doesn't pay the bills, Chen countered. Dead operators don't collect paychecks. A longer pause this time. You make a compelling argument, American. But my employer pays well for results, and leaving witnesses alive is bad for business. The negotiations were over. Ghost would not be reasoned with. Chen began moving again, heading for the secondary valley Morrison had identified. Behind him, he could hear the sound of vehicles approaching, either Ghost's extraction or coalition reinforcements. His earpiece crackled with a new voice. Overwatch, this is Falcon 3-1. We have visual on your smoke marker. Moving to extract. Chen looked around and realized he hadn't thrown any smoke marker, which meant either Williams had done it from his position or someone was impersonating the rescue team. Falcon 3-1. Authenticate with code word. Silence. Williams, did you throw smoke? Negative. I don't have any smoke markers with me. Chen felt ice in his veins. Ghost was using coalition call signs to lure him into the open. Morrison, can you confirm location of actual Falcon 3-1? Falcon 3-1 is still 12 minutes from your location. The transmission you received was not from coalition forces. Chun was on his own in a valley full of enemies, with no backup coming and limited ammunition. Ghost had turned the entire operation into an elaborate trap, using Chin's own rescue team as bait. But Chin had one advantage Ghost might not have considered. He was no longer following anyone else's plan. Chun stopped running and found a defensive position among a cluster of rocks. Instead of continuing to evade, he was going to make a stand here and force Ghost to come to him. If the mercenary leader wanted blood for his fallen operators, he would have to pay for it personally. Chun checked his remaining ammunition and settled behind his rifle, scanning the approaches to his position. Somewhere out there, Ghost and his team were moving in for the kill. But Marcus Chun was a United States Navy SEAL sniper, trained to fight against impossible odds and win. And this fight was far from over.